Hi. How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Back in
What's that?
you're back in the office.
Yeah, we're in the office 2 days a week. Some of us, not everybody.
How does that
It
feel?
depends.
Is it nice to be back or feel weird or
A little bit of both.
yeah.
Um, it's nice to have some quiet.
I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Jessica. Before I do, I'll just say welcome again. I'm Julian Chevalier. I'm the Division Director for the Museum Ed Division of NAEA. I'm really glad that you're here for these weekly meetings. They are casual, they are informal. If you feel comfortable, we'd love to see your faces, so feel free to turn on your cameras, but I understand that's not everybody's bag. I was lucky enough to get a hair appointment, and if you haven't, I feel you. So Jessica Fuentes is going to be moderating today, and I will turn things over to Jessica. Thanks so much for helping out. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Julian. My name is Jessica Fuentes. I'm the manager of school and community outreach at the Amon Carter Museum of American Art in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm also the representative-elect for the Western region of the Museum Division of NAEA. So before we get started, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. In this role, we meet once a month. We help to plan initiatives like these peer-to-peer weeklies, social media, pre-conference, and we'll be looking for people who are interested in joining us starting in March after the conference. So if it sounds like something you're interested in, we have several different regions. You can go to the NAEA website and learn a little bit more about it. But as you're kind of coming to these meetings with us, just keep in mind that, you know, we're looking for people for the future to help us continue this. And a few other things. All of y'all are already muted right now, but if you could please stay muted and raise your hand. Use the raise hand icon when you want to speak. And if you have questions or concerns that you want to share, please do so in the chat. Julian's going to help us keep an eye on that and make sure that those get addressed. And then also, this is not a lecture, it's a conversation. So I'll be talking a little bit about what we're doing and what we're planning with the Amon Carter, but we really want to share and hear what other institutions are working through, what you're planning on, successes and challenges that you may be facing already. So just to kick things off, I'll talk
Before
a little
you,
bit
I'm sorry,
about,
can I
oh, go
just
ahead.
jump in? I think what we found last time was that, so the hand raise feature is if you click on participants at the bottom,
Oh,
then
thanks.
you get a list of everybody on the side, and you at the bottom of that list, there's the hand raise feature. So you feel free to try that. Another thing that ended up we kind of defaulted to is if you put in the chat that you've got something to share and would like to kind of be put in a queue, then I can basically just write everybody's name down and say, like, we'll do this person, then this person, then this person, just like good classroom management. So, or attempted good classroom management.
Thanks, Julian. So to kind of kick things off, I was just going to start and tell a little bit about what we're doing and what we're planning to do here at the Carter. We have been doing distance learning programs for over a decade, which means that we have equipment already kind of prepared to do these kinds of virtual tours. And historically, our distance learning programs have been live and interactive. So moving forward into this new school year, we're kind of shifting our distance learning programs to actually be pre-recorded so that we can co-opt that technology and use it for virtual tours for students that would have otherwise come to the museum. Like most museums, we have some standard partnerships. We work with the fourth graders of Fort Worth ISD every year, the fifth graders in HEB ISD every year. So we want to make sure that when we're talking about doing these virtual tours, that we're prioritizing those partnerships first and giving them a virtual live option. Another thing that we're kind of thinking about and playing with is we're going to be doing these through Zoom. And many of you may already know, but Zoom has a breakout functions feature where you can do breakout rooms. So we're kind of thinking of ways that we can incorporate that into how we do a school tour. And maybe each room has like a different gallery teacher talking about a different work of art, and we rotate them through to different groups of students. That being said, we're thinking about some gallery teachers being in the galleries and maybe some being from home, sharing just a share screen and an image of a work of art. We found that even with some of our great technology, sometimes that PowerPoint image is going to just be a lot better than what you can see otherwise. So those are some of the things that we're kind of thinking about here at the Carter, but I know a lot of museums are kind of asking themselves if they're going virtual, if they're going to do pre-recorded, what kind of format they're offering. So Julene's just posted our poll, and if y'all could take a second to kind of look at that and respond, just to get a sense of where people are falling on that kind of spectrum of what type of programs you might be looking at. All right, so we've got the results pretty quickly. We added that in person at the museum only as an option because we weren't sure. Different places are doing different things, but I'm not surprised to see that nobody is planning on that right now. It looks like a lot of people are planning on offering both virtual live and virtual pre-recorded, nothing at the museum. And then we have, some kind of in the other different categories as well. So maybe a good kind of place to start is thinking about these virtual programs. What types of platforms are y'all thinking about? Is everybody kind of leaning towards Zoom? Are there other ways that y'all are thinking about hosting your programs? I see Teams, Zoom.
Blue Jeans. I don't know what Blue Jeans is.
Yeah, can we hear more about that? Flipgrid, I've heard of that one.
Allison, can you share a little bit more about what Blue Jeans is? Is that a platform, I'm guessing?
Yeah, it's a video conferencing platform. But I can post the link in the text box for you all to look at.
Are there any perks to it that you found, or it looks like Emmy at Museum of Fine Arts Houston also?
I like this response, whatever the school is using. That's definitely something that we're kind of trying to figure out too. Here in Fort Worth, we've gotten together with some of the other local museums, the Kimball Art Museum, the Modern Art Museum, the Sid Richardson Museum. And as educators, we've been kind of regrouping and talking about like, how are we going to all approach this? Because ideally, we would want to give our local teachers a similar kind of option across the board, so they're not having to do a bunch of different things to come on their museum field trips. And one of the things that we're doing is we're pulling in kind of an advisory committee of teachers from different districts locally. We've sent them a survey kind of asking what kind of technology they're already using, what their district's plans are for the fall, because that might be different from district to district. And then we're going to get them together for a Zoom meeting like this to kind of talk through some more specifics and questions that we have to get a sense of how we can best serve the community.
There's a key question in there that, oh, now I just lost it, but I'm not going to be able to credit you right away, but somebody asked about if you use Google Classrooms, can you still monetize the experience? And I know that's something a lot of us are thinking about, is charging, whether you can, and if you use various educational tools, are you able to monetize still? I don't know if anybody has an answer for that. And it looks like Heinel raised her hand. So Heinel, would you unmute and share?
Hi. I don't know the specifics about Google prohibiting the use of Google Suite to monetize. I do know that we were not accepted into Google for Education as an institution, but we are under the Google for Nonprofit in terms of the accounts that we have. And we're definitely still experimenting with the monetizing. What we tried in the past year with our gallery explorations, which were our in-gallery experiences, was that it was a pay what you wish or a donate what you wish model. And so technically we are not officially charging for it. We are offering the opportunity for people to send a donation if they so choose. And so I think that gives us a little bit of wiggle room. And we did actually surpass our revenue goal last year with that model. I don't know, what this upcoming year will be like, because obviously people's lives are a little bit different, but we did some calculations and, at a very, very super conservative estimate, what we are telling schools is it costs us a minimum of $5 a student to work with you. And we do not have admission to our building. So we just basically say to schools, here's what it costs us to work with you. If you are able to donate anything towards that, that helps us sustain this programming. And if you're not able to, that's great too. So yes, I can share the language from that. I have a longer kind of Dear Colleagues letter that we sent out to our partnering teachers and districts. And then we also have a shorter paragraph that we include in all of our confirmation letters to just say, this is what it costs us. Anything you contribute can help. And we have some people who contribute a lot more. We have some people that contribute nothing. And then we have probably more people who do something kind of in between. So I'm hoping that despite Google's situation, we may have kind of a loophole with that.
That's awesome. Thanks, Heinel. And I see that Jill at the Chesapeake Bay Museum has raised her hand too.
The monetizing part has been really an interesting conversation for us. I was in the classroom for 5 years. And so my experience was that booking a field trip was a pass-through model. And I think a lot of you already know that, but most of our schools are paying like whatever the cost of the field trip, bus plus admission. The parents, they divide it out based on the number of students and send that home with the permission slip. And then the parents send in $16 or whatever the random amount of money is. And so thinking about that, and I'm not sure, one of the things that we've talked about with our local school districts is that I don't know what that looks like. Our funding model doesn't work anymore for field trips. And so they're starting to think about that at the district level to see, are there ways where the district can provide support, though I'm not confident that that is going to be sustainable in the long run. So I think our greatest asset, we have a donor who has funded bus scholarships for us, and our president went to that donor and asked her to release the funds from bus scholarships so that I can use those to support virtual programming going forward. So we're fortunate to be in that position, but I don't expect to the revenue side that I'm going to be able to go to just because when I was in the classroom, I had $200 to buy pencils for the year. And that was everything from any subscription I needed to a website. So I'm not sure what that funding model is going to look like. So thinking about working with our advancement team to think about how we can fund our school programs, at least to get us through until we can have on-site programs again, has been really critical.
Thanks for sharing, Jill. I know for our institution, we don't charge for school tours, so that's not even something that I had considered, but I'm sure that that's something that many people are worried about and thinking about and trying to figure out how to handle.
I see also that Michelle in North Carolina added to the chat that they began virtual field trips 4 years ago with a paid model, but then changed it a year ago because it ended up being prohibitive and some teachers were paying out of pocket. So all North Carolina schools are free and they're a state art museum. But I know that there's lots of pressure to monetize whatever possibly can be. I don't know. I know that this specifically is about K-12 and school programs, but there's also the potential mixed model for monetizing adult tours, virtual experiences, and when possible, keeping things free for schools.
Yeah, and I'll say that our distance learning programs have also historically been something that we charged for, but over the last couple of years, we moved to a model where we were making this free for Texas schools. So for regional local schools, we had that be free, knowing that some of the schools that we were serving, like in the Northeast and New York and Pennsylvania, had funding and were prepared to pay for those programs. But again, kind of moving forward into recorded distance learning, I think that we'll either offer it free across the board or maybe have a much smaller rate that we charge out of state schools and institutions.
So I see that Heinel posted some of the text that she's been using in Cleveland for donation-based, and Katie Erickson is also talking about collaborating with other schools or, I'm sorry, other institutions in your area so that you can agree on a similar price too. And that's something that I think is exciting to consider, collaborating with other, I know we've got non-art museums on the call today, which is awesome, but if you are an art museum, collaborating with non-arts museums to offer, it doesn't have to be incredibly tied together, but just making sure you're touching on some of the same points can be really valuable and exciting.
Julene and Jessica, can I jump in with just a related question?
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of folks have experience with using price-based models in the past or offering digital programs in the past. I'm wondering for anybody, just because the world is a very different place right now, have any of you had funding organizations reach out in a supportive way to offer financial backing because they may expect that schools only have virtual options in the fall? Does anybody have a situation like that in their city where somebody is helping to support that because of the reality of students not being able to physically visit?
I think the only thing that we've had is similar to, I think, what Jill mentioned. Some of our grantors have been flexible and are happy to be flexible with how money was originally intended to be used versus how we will be using it. So that has helped. We had a grant, for example, that specifically was for pre-K related tours, all of which were canceled because of the pandemic. And so that will all be kind of going to fund our gallery teachers' salaries, until it kind of runs out. So that kind of stuff is very helpful.
And I see that Bree has their hand raised. And Jill, I'm sorry, did I just not lower your hand, or do you have another question?
I have another.
Okay, so we'll do Bree then Jill.
Yeah, my hand was raised for the monetizing question. And then I also saw somebody else in the comments that had asked, and this is my other like question that I had was, how are people blending pre-recorded programming with like an interactive live elements? Is it all done in one experience? Are they separate experiences? Because we're trying to figure that out.
I was just going to say to the funding, we get some funding from the state, and for this year, for the spring, because we just canceled all field trip programming, they said, we know you're not going to meet your service numbers. We're okay with you not meeting your service numbers. That's fine. But what we're expecting, and our advisory council for this group of cultural institutions in Maryland, we're expecting that we need to demonstrate how we're shifting our programming. So being able to talk to what the changes are that we're making and why it's important that we are still funded, because whoever put the comment in that the need is only going to increase. And so talking about like meeting the students and the teachers where they are, and then being able to articulate how we are shifting to meet their needs, and that we are still, it's still important to fund us, is something that we're talking about across the state of Maryland.
That's great. And I also want to point out, Jenny from the Ackland in North Carolina also noted, thinking about that merging of pre-recorded but then interactive is developing like a PDF or some kind of worksheet that can be, that the teacher, you know, intentionally pauses and then students can do an activity in between. And I know that Allie also had their hand up.
Yes, it was to address Bree's question about mixing both kind of types of experiences. And we're also basically, I think, utilizing the pre-recorded material in pre-visit and post-visit materials that we're giving out. So we're kind of like sandwiching the live stuff in the middle, and hoping that teachers will watch, you know, links to videos that we have on YouTube and things like that to kind of contextualize and prepare for conversation. We'll see if they actually do it. You know, and we're kind of planning our discussions to where it's not like if they don't do the pre-work, we can't do the visit, but that it would just be helpful and enriching.
Yeah, and we're doing something kind of similar, where we're imagining that we'll have some pre-recorded sessions that are kind of a follow-up post-visit for what a live recorded session or what a live interactive session would be like. But also, as I mentioned, like with our distance learning programs, having kind of those set recorded sessions that some teachers could just go and download is really helpful, because I worry that we're not going to be able to see as many students as we would normally see in a day, because serving them virtually is going to be strange and new and different. And so having those pre-recorded kind of snippets as an alternative for teachers who can't get into the registration because it's already been booked up, or for teachers who we don't offer something during the time period that they want, or even typically our distance learning programs, our biggest audience has been 3rd through 5th grade. But thinking about the opportunities that now open up by doing these pre-recorded sessions for middle school and high school teachers who would typically want us to do like back-to-back all day long sessions that we couldn't do. So now if we offer them this pre-recorded video that's maybe 20 to 30 minutes, they can show it with each of their classes in the day.
Nice. So Amy had her hand up, and then after that I noticed that we also had some comments in the chat. Amy, will go in just 2 seconds while I try and deal with my trackpad. I hate trackpads. Kelly at the Lucas is also talking about experimenting in online lessons instead of a field trip. So creating something that, again, like that, and not necessarily even pre-recorded. Kelly, am I understanding that might be just digital? Okay, just like a PDF or something. Yeah, great. And slideshows, not a PDF, but more of a, Kelly will type it up. But it's Amy's turn. All right.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say we did some testing. We don't have public offerings yet for schools. We did some testings in June with a variety of age groups. And for high school students, what I did was actually integrated in some pre-recorded, like ICA produced artist interviews, like very brief, like 1 to 2 minutes. And the teacher, there was like very, very positive response to doing that. I mean, we're a contemporary art museum. We talk a lot about the artist's voice. We try to integrate that into our lessons regardless. But this was like, we've been thinking a lot about how virtual learning actually affords us opportunities that we wouldn't have in the gallery. So we've really been thinking about creating different types of experiences that it's not necessarily like mimicking what we would be doing in the galleries. So we might not necessarily show a clip of a video of the artist talking during a tour, but we're actually able to do that really seamlessly online. And I would just say that, yeah, I mean, it's something we already had, so it wasn't something we produced just for these visits, but with the high school groups in particular, it worked really, really well.
I love that idea, and thinking about this as, you know, a new way to do something, and what we could do differently and better because of digital. One of the things that we're thinking about as well is bringing in outside voices with local artists that we could have, like, you know, pay them for their time to make a 2-minute snippet that then we can share with you know, countless numbers of students, and I think that's just such a lovely idea.
I noticed that Allison asked, do you see the activities being delivered in a classroom, thinking that students will be back in a physical classroom, or everybody's in their own location? And I know that that's a big consideration. A lot of us don't know what's going to be, what that will look like. So trying to be ready for both. And I'm curious if what folks are thinking about that, what goes into determining how something's going to be better for one or the other, or making it really adaptable. Sorry, I was muted. Jamie, you raised your hand. Would you like to go ahead?
Sure, thanks, Elaine. Hi, as well. Sorry, I joined a little bit late, so if I repeat myself on anything that people have talked about already, sorry. So we're in Minnesota, and they announced a couple weeks ago, the Department of Education announced that they'd be making a final announcement at the end of July about whether classrooms will be in-person, hybrid, or virtual. But within that, they are asking all of the school districts to create a plan that includes 3 scenarios. So virtual at-home learning, hybrid model, and an in-school model. And whatever they decide in the fall, there's the caveat that at any given moment, a school, a district, an area could go back and forth between any 3 of those. So in everything that we're creating for our distance learning program, we're taking that into consideration. So we want this to be able to, so like the slideshow that we're creating, will be able to be used by a tour guide to do a Zoom virtual field trip, but it will also have components in it where a teacher could lead it for her classroom, whether they're at home or in their virtual environment, but then also have components that the students could go through on their own, and that there would be sort of some kind of icon that we know that if they click on that, then there's something that they need to do or turn in, or a way that the teacher would know that they went through the process. So we're kind of trying to make one thing work for all of those different scenarios, realizing that the situation could change at any given moment.
I think that's a really great point, is that we're going to have to be even more flexible than when curatorial takes down the artwork that was the key artwork in your tour. I mean, I think that's one of the good things. Sorry for my dog freaking out in the background. one of the bonuses of using a PowerPoint is that you can feature all the artwork in the collection, and that can be huge instead of just what's in the gallery. I know one thing that's been a concern in talking to other colleagues is about classroom management, right? If it's teacher in physical classroom, that's one thing, but if there's all the students on their own Zoom calls, that's another thing. And in this other group, we were talking about really partnering with the teacher and making sure that it really is this dialogue back and forth, hopefully a little bit in advance with the teacher, but recognizing that it's gonna be a little bit weird at first, as all Zoom stuff is.
One of the other things that I feel fortunate that we've been able to do, and I'm hoping and assuming that maybe some of y'all are doing this as well, is that this summer we're also kind of experimenting with some of these options with summer tours for community centers and some of our partners and daycare facilities that we would normally see for in-person tours. So it's been really nice to kind of reach out to some of our specific organizations that we see every summer and ask them to help us test it out and kind of play around and learn and get a footing before we really get into the school year, which I know is going to come quickly and feel completely different.
I also wanted to highlight Zeb's comment, I hope I'm saying your name right, and that thinking about the number of artworks or objects that you touch on and the time frame of 45 minutes, I think that's really crucial. We've been hearing that, and I think we all know from our own personal experience in Zoom meetings, that 30 minutes is your sweet spot, and so 45 is probably just right. So yeah, Zeb, if you want to go ahead.
Sure, it took me a second to unmute. We surveyed our teachers up front, and 30 minutes actually was probably the most asked for time for the length of the tour. We added in the extra 15 to give us an extra second for intro, for any technical difficulties, all the stuff that we know is going to happen. And we piloted this for 3 weeks in June. And I would say some of the reassuring stuff is the same thing that happens in person happens virtually. Groups are late, someone's not there yet, things happen and they're just as okay with it. So that's kind of where we went for the 45 and 3 to 5. The other one is we tell them to have 5. I never got to a 5th work of art, but just in case, having it all ready.
That's awesome. There was an important question, I think, that we've scrolled past. I think it's about how do we, Jill talking about the impact, how do we know anything's having an impact? I think that's the giant question across all of education in general. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for figuring out how to measure that and document it moving forward. I wonder if anybody has some ideas in place already. And Allie raised her hand.
I've been thinking about using things like Microsoft Forms or, Google surveys as like little mini, I mean, it's assessments, but like they're not graded, but, inserting little questions that they can link to and fill out so that you're kind of keeping track of things like that. And then like, of course, like teacher surveys and stuff at the end, and student surveys if they give permission are certainly helpful. Not the most exciting idea, but a way to, if like keeping literal numbers is important, then you can track the clicks. Also, if you, within your documents, if you create like bit.lys, like the shortened URLs for any links that you have, that keeps track of how many times it's been clicked, so you can get data on that. So.
That's great. Thanks, Allie.
Another topic that's come up is the engaging in a drawing activity, and I'm guessing probably similarly potentially writing activities or other things like that. would love to have folks, if you want to just go, you don't need to raise your hand. If you just want to go ahead and unmute yourself and say your name and then start talking.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Williams. I'm from the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art. We're under construction in Los Angeles, so we actually don't have a building. That said, we do have some school partners. So any in-classroom programming that I was doing to help, we were really trying to work with students to build and design what our offerings will be when we open in a couple of years, switch to online. I heard from our school partners that any type of field trips, everything was cut from their LAUSD schools. And I'm wondering if you've heard the same thing. So our workaround was we changed entirely to arts integration. I worked with English language arts teachers, and I would connect pieces from our collection with whatever their reading exercises were. And I would be there in the Zoom classes twice a week with partners, although you could do this on one-offs for a field trip. And I would introduce works of art. We would do looking and discussion exercises, and then we would do drawing. The schools asked for directed drawing at first because most of these middle school students did not have any experience with visual arts. They had never taken an arts class before. So I did it's like draw a triangle and do this. So the first couple lessons I did that, and I would use the whiteboard feature on a screen share so they could draw along with me. And there was a lot of success with that. And then once we had built up some drawing tools, I just, gave prompts like, let's use the line, shape, color, pattern, things that we've done, and our imagination and create X, Y, Z. So I'd be happy to answer more questions about arts integration or drawing, but I found that it worked quite well. And I taught 125 students at once on Zoom, which was challenging.
We've also made use of a document camera to do instructions for drawing or even writing. If we do like poetry, we can kind of write out the form that we're following and kind of talk through it as we're doing the activity. But I don't know if we could do it with 125.
They didn't all engage. Don't give me an award yet. However, I will say that a lot more engaged in the art component of the lesson than the ELA component. And I think that's just because we are used to engaging students in a different way than what they have to learn for ELA. It was like a brain break for them. And the teachers were very generous in forefronting that and saying, this is arts integration, but it's also a break for you and a chance to be social and stuff like that, which was great.
I want to read out Eric's discussion that he put in the chat because he doesn't have a mic or camera on the desktop. Completely different subject for future discussions. Better tech at home than at work. Yep. Serving educators and that come regularly and those who have not traditionally visited. So far, the hue and cry is not for virtual touring. They also do not seem to want artist in residence sessions, mostly for responses from teachers who come every year, seem to be leaning to classroom activities. So they're developing scripts that volunteers have put together. I think that also does potentially touch on another opportunity in that we found that just as far as general visitorship during quarantine, there are people engaging with the museum's website or social media that have never visited the museum before and never interacted with the social media before. So I think there's potentially also that option for school group interaction, a teacher that's never taken a field trip and can add this on and not have to do much prep. I think we're going to hopefully get some educators. We're going to convert them to the good ways of museums. I'm also curious as to what folks are doing as far as who is facilitating these. Is it staff? Is it docents and guides too? I know some people have volunteer guides, some people have paid artists. I'm curious as to what's working out there.
I can sort of speak up here. Hi, everyone. This is, I don't know why it says that I'm Bree. That's not my name. I'm Jody. I don't know why it says I'm somebody else. It's very strange. I'm going to rename myself. Bizarre. Hi, there I am. So I'm at the Lowe Art Museum, which is part of the University of Miami, and we have been leading the virtual tours ourselves, the education team. Mostly because of the technology in terms of who has a Zoom account and who can't. But when we were doing virtual tours before school ended, the teachers were inviting us to join their Zoom classroom, and then give us control of the screen, which would help. But we have been continuing to train our new docent volunteer class to lead VTS discussions via Zoom. And with that small group, it has been successful, but they haven't been the one initiating the call and setting up the meeting. So my big question, to your point, Julian, is that, you know, if I have to bother setting up the meeting and then making sure they're there anyway, you know, I might as well be there myself, right? So in terms of time, I'm not really sure how to manage that.
I think it's definitely a matter of scale too, because at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, we were working on, we had 300 volunteer guides and docents and trying to keep them engaged, and knowing that a small percentage of them would be interested / willing / able to try Zoom. And there was a lot of institutional emphasis on consistency and brand and all of that stuff, which definitely is important. So it was, if we want to hit the volume that we want to try and reach, we're going to use the volunteers, but also exactly what you're saying, like definitely planning to have a staff person there with everyone. And the long-term plan was to get the volunteers, or at least some of them, in a state where they felt, where we trusted that they were comfortable to troubleshoot, etc., and probably always pairing them up, you know, so you've got somebody to do the back end stuff and not have to do everything all at once. And Zev has his hand up. Go ahead, Zev.
We invited a select group of the volunteers to shadow our pilot and then work with us on what training looks like to get up to speed for the fall. Based on capacity, we're going to need many volunteers and not have the ability to be on all of them. So getting them involved, getting them to figure out what are the tech issues that they need to know. And the first thing, honestly, getting them over the fear factor that this isn't the tour that they used to give, but having this group of 6 able to kind of do that has been really helpful.
And I can expand a little bit on some of kind of what I talked about earlier about using the breakout rooms. Like, we're kind of imagining, and again, we don't know yet, that when we used to have like a whole school's 4th grade class come, that might be like 5 different 4th grade classes, that in place of it, our virtual tour would be like one Zoom meeting where we invite all 5 of those classes to come to. We do our normal welcome with everybody present in the same space like we are now, but then we break them out into 5 different breakout rooms, and we have 5 different teachers in each of those rooms and rotate the teachers through. So we're really all just on, like, the gallery teachers are all just on one thing together. We have one teacher in each room, and then one person that's doing any of the tech that might need to happen with each of those breakout rooms. If anybody needs her, they can text her or just use the chat function and get her attention, and she can help. I don't know if that's going to work, but that's kind of what we're thinking about to kind of help, so that we don't have to have like 2 people on each call, but maybe we can kind of do it this way collaboratively.
I think there's an interesting question about nomenclature, like what are you calling these things? Because virtual tours, as we have discovered inside the museum, means very different things to PR versus education versus curatorial. So what are folks thinking about for that? I think as far as mainly clarity to share with educators.
I can say I asked that question. I've been calling them virtual visits because we actually had two separate teachers call them that, like independently when they without prompt. But it's just something I'm thinking about because we are also planning on incorporating some kind of art making going forward. So and really, like, we are envisioning these as so different than we would a typical tour. So and I do think going forward, because I saw someone else asking, like, even when the museum's open, will you continue to be facilitating these from your homes, or will you be at the museum? And I can speak to us for the time being. Like, even when the museum opens, I will continue to be facilitating from my home. And so I also think that when folks hear tour, they think you're physically in the building. I've just noticed that. So it's I know it seems like maybe a silly thing, but it's something I'm thinking about a lot.
I think that's a really great point, and it's come up as far as like access to tech, better tech at home or better tech at work, and thinking especially about volunteers or, you know, contract educators. One thing that we lobbied for at NAEA was creating basically like a studio space at the museum so that staff or volunteers could go there, do it. And again, like, then you've got all the tech you need, you've got a good setup, you've got good audio, you've got a branded background, all of that stuff. However, keeping that space clean and sanitized is another thing, because one of my main concerns was not wanting to put volunteers in any kind of position where it would be possible for them to get sick. Like, that's not ethical in my book. So lots of challenges to consider. I want to also push people to share more questions in the chat, share ideas for what we can talk about at other ones of these. This is, I think, a very big topic that we are only scratching the surface of. So I think in 2 weeks, we'll revisit this topic. So we'll continue the conversation. We still definitely have time. I just wanted to throw all that out there. I did also want to mention, before I forget, that we are recording this with the intent to share it later. So if there's anybody who's uncomfortable with that and doesn't want this to be shared, just send me a direct message. You can choose that in the chat feature to send just to me, and we don't have to do that.
I'll just chime in here. Hi, Jamie. I did a lot of research looking at virtual field trips, and science kind of marine type museums do this a lot. And so I saw a lot of great examples of how to set it up and the different options that they might have. And while they had different technologies and were working with a different subject matter, I really liked the way a lot of these places had things laid out, really clear and concise, how they laid it out for teachers as well. So just something to think about, to not just look at what other museums are doing, but like science-y centers and marine centers and zoos. Some of them have been doing it for a lot longer.
I also see some conversations happening around art supplies and supply packs. I'd love to kind of dive into that. It's not something that we've done with our school tours per se, but we do have like community outreach programs, after school programs, summer programs, where we have been putting together some supply packs, but they've been kind of minimal and with a small group as we're kind of figuring that out. But I'd love to hear if others are doing something successfully or have some plans for that.
In terms of the supply packs, we're hosting a virtual summer camp, and we're providing the supply kits ahead of time for parents or guardians to come into the museum and pick up curbside. And what we actually did is we did 3 staff people packing the bags, and we actually like made kind of like a promo video of us like kind of like cleaning our hands, wearing gloves, wearing masks, so that it like made the parents and the guardians like more comfortable, like, oh, okay, this isn't like Typhoid Mary like making this backpack for my kid. And that was actually like really, really, we had a really good response. And then we had like a lot of people who were like, oh, well, now I want to be doing this virtual summer camp with you guys. So we sold a few more spots, which was awesome. So yeah, I would have fun with it if you're going to do it. And then just kind of be smart. We did everything except for like the paper towels and glue sticks, to be perfectly honest, because most classrooms tend to have that. But yeah, it was really successful.
Yeah, that's great. And what the recording that we do have that we will plan on posting is about virtual summer camps. And there's a lot of discussion on there about prepping materials and stuff. So that's a big issue as well. And I noticed that Jennifer at the Stark Museum had their hand raised. So if you would unmute, go ahead.
Hey guys, we're, excuse me, also doing virtual summer camp, but looking at school tours. One of the things virtual summer camp taught me is that we've been extremely ambitious with 5 weeks, 5 videos every day recorded in advance, and we don't have a production team. So we're going a recorded route. But one of the important parts of our curriculum is that our schools don't all have visual arts teachers. So for the elementary level, we are that. So all of our recorded lessons will come when you register. You will get a classroom set of supplies. Now, I will say that's making us rethink our budget too, right? Like, what are we using? What can we think about from their school supply list? What do we know they have on hand? What can we supplement to? And what are those unique things? But for us, we know, and I know someone else was talking about this, about that classroom experience. That's really important for us, and it's something our schools rely on us for. So it's our sessions will include a gallery portion, and then we'll kind of flip over into our studio. So someone will be in our studio making, and they can follow along, almost like what Kelly was talking about with the guided drawing. It may not just be drawing. That's one of the things that my team's talking a lot about, is that our teachers do some guided drawing. They can go online and find those guided drawing techniques. What can we bring to them that they may not have access to or think about in a different way? So that's, from us, that's a really important piece of this. And I think, Julian, you're exactly right with the kit stuff. I think from 2 weeks ago, forgive me, will definitely be helpful for people thinking about that. And there's a lot we've learned. We just finished packing up 500 kits this week. So.
A couple artists that I'm working with for an upcoming teacher workshop, thinking about this idea of even the teacher thinking about their own teaching if it's virtual in the fall. And both of them were talking about thinking about supplies in a different way. So what does that really mean? And could you be more flexible with that? Could that be whatever the student might have on hand? It might not be a traditional art supply that we think about. And in what ways does having students use supplies and objects and visual pieces from their own life and experience bring them more connection into the actual activity? So, so I like that idea of thinking about the supplies in a different way, and how we can, could they go outside and get something from outside that could be used as a supply as well.
Allie, you've got your hand up if you want to go ahead.
Also, more things that are free that we're strategizing on is integrating different like mindfulness techniques, different ways to get up and move. Let's get up and dance. Let's do something, with our bodies, do a finger play, depending on how old your audiences are. They're getting like, especially if they're going to be at home, they're experiencing a lot of probably Zoom fatigue. We're experiencing Zoom fatigue, so figuring out how to like get up out of the chair is helpful and free.
Well, and I think this is something that we've definitely, the focus of this conversation has been virtual K-12 tours, but knowing that not all of our students in all of our school districts have access to technology, or it's limited and it's on a phone and the data plan might run out on the 3rd of the month. So, even packets of, printed packets. I know that that's definitely the route that some school districts have had to go. I think I remember from our virtual summer camp session that the folks at Crystal Bridges have been doing like thousands of packs for the summer that are like materials and instructions in the packs and that are distributed widely. So other things to think about as well. And I think that idea of that Allie brought up of getting people to move and breathe and, mindfulness is tapping into the idea of trauma-informed teaching, and that we're all experiencing trauma in some way, shape, or form going through living in the world in which we live. And I think that's probably another great topic for one of these in the future, is how we can keep that in, mindfulness in general, or trauma-informed or social emotional learning, how we can work that into all of our museum education work.
It kind of reminds me of thinking about the elements of art and asking students, instead of like drawing a line or drawing a circle, maybe they could reenact those shapes and get up out of their chairs and kind of, either do the finger motion or create it with their hands. Things like that might be really fun.
Yeah, that's great. And then I saw so many people here just doing it as well. We all need to do it. And I saw that Jody raised her hand.
Thanks, Julian. I just wanted to let everyone know, it's a shameless plug, but at the same time helpful, that I've been, since the start, we have a mindfulness program. So we've been doing mindful looking with a work of art. It's every Tuesday at 1 and it's free. My colleagues and I lead them along with 2 mindfulness practitioners. So if anyone wants to join us, I hope you can. It's been helpful for us and helpful for me. So it's important to remember the teachers. I did a mindfulness teacher workshop this year in October as well. So they need it also.
Is there a link or something you can share in the chat box?
Yeah, I'm gonna send it to you. You have to, because we got Zoom bombed the first time, you have to sign up for our mindfulness. This is a whole nother topic. You have to sign up for the mindfulness email blast. And then every Monday they send an email and you have to register for the session for the next day. And then you get the Zoom link. Anyone else having these challenges?
That's why we've got a separate Zoom link for every one of these too, yeah. And I think, that kind of thinking about accessibility, Zev also brought up the captioning as key, and, physical accessibility, intellectual accessibility, all of these things. Sometimes there's perks with digital and sometimes there's limitations. And feel free to plug away. You're welcome to share. We're here to learn from each other. So if other folks have things to link in the chat, please do.
Something silly that I worked on with my teens this spring was also just drawing your own emojis that you can use during your meetings. And so it is kind of a fun way to start a tour. and the students could use it throughout to express how they feel about a work of art. It's nonverbal, so they don't have to necessarily figure out the mic or the chat box or anything. And it's also just a tiny bit physical. So yeah, I'll throw that one in the mix.
That's awesome. Gets you drawing right away and doing something simple and familiar, and then a way to respond. Love it. I realize we are at time according to my clock. I really want to thank everybody. Thank you so much, Jessica, for keeping us going and getting us started. I'm really going to work on getting this recording up. And the recording does come with the chat, so we'll share that too. And please let us know what other topics we can cover, and follow us on social media, all that good stuff. Yeah. All right. Good to see so many familiar folks and new folks, and